The day everything fell apart didn't start with any warning. It was quiet, ordinary, almost peaceful. I remember the smell of burnt toast in the kitchen, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the sound of my kids laughing over some cartoon they'd already seen 100 times. It was one of those mornings that made you believe everything was fine, right until it wasn't. By noon, I had lost my job. By night, I had lost my family. It started with a meeting. I'd worked at the steel factory for 10 years, long, hard, honest work. The kind that left your hands rough and your back sore. But it paid the bills. It made me feel useful, worth something. That morning, my supervisor called me into his office. His expression said everything before his mouth even opened. I'd seen that look on others, men carrying boxes out of the factory, heads down, but never thought it'd be me. He cleared his throat, eyes darting anywhere but at mine. "Ethan, I'm sorry. You know how things have been going. They're shutting down our section." I blinked. "So that's it." He nodded. "You'll get a month's pay. It's not personal. Not personal." I remember those words hitting harder than any punch. I gathered my things. My gloves, a half-empty thermos, and a framed photo of my kids from last summer. My name tag was still pinned to my shirt when I walked out the gate for the last time. The air outside felt heavier than usual. I told myself I'd be fine, that I'd find another job, that I'd figure it out like I always did. But that was before I got home. When I opened the door, the house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that meant something was wrong. Marielle was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. The moment our eyes met, I knew she already knew. "They let you go," she said flatly. I nodded. "Cutbacks." "It wasn't. I don't want to hear excuses." Her tone cut through me like glass. "I'm not making excuses," I said quietly. I'll find something else. I've already been." "Ethan," she exhaled, looking down, shaking her head. "You've been saying that for years. Every time something falls apart, you promise you'll fix it. But it's always just words." I felt my chest tighten. "I've been trying." "I know you have," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But trying doesn't keep the lights on. It doesn't pay for Nolan's school or Tessa's medicine. I can't do this anymore." The next words broke me. "I'm taking the kids. I'm going to my sister's for a while." I froze. "What? No. Marielle, please, you can't just." "I have to," she said, her voice low, final. "They deserve stability. And right now, you're not stable." My heart pounded in my ears. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" She turned away, her shoulders shaking. "I can't keep watching you fall apart and pretending it's okay." I wanted to fight back, to tell her I'd change, I'd do better, I'd find work, anything. But all that came out was silence. A few minutes later, the kids came into the room. Nolan looked confused. Tessa clutched her stuffed rabbit. "Dad," Nolan asked softly, "where are we going?" I forced a smile, though my throat burned. "You're going to stay with your aunt for a bit. Just a little vacation." Tessa frowned. "Aren't you coming?" I looked at her, her small hands gripping that toy like it was her whole world, and I couldn't lie. "Not this time." "Not tonight, sweetheart," I whispered. When the door closed behind them, the sound echoed in my chest. The silence that followed was unbearable. Their laughter, their footsteps, their voices, all gone. The walls felt empty. Even the pictures on the fridge seemed like ghosts of a life that didn't exist anymore. I sat on the floor of the living room, staring at nothing for what felt like hours. The weight of everything pressed down, the bills on the counter, the job I no longer had, the family that had just walked away. At some point, night fell. The house was pitch black except for the faint streetlight bleeding through the curtains. My stomach growled, but I couldn't eat. My eyes burned, but I couldn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Then, somewhere between midnight and dawn, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and walked out. The streets were empty, just a few flickering lights and the distant hum of traffic. The cold air stung my face. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked, past the gas station, past the park where Nolan used to fly his kite. past everything that reminded me of what I'd lost. I must have walked for miles before I saw it. A small diner glowing in the dark like a warm memory. The sign buzzed faintly, Daryl's Diner, open 24 hours. I hesitated at the door, staring at my reflection in the glass. My eyes looked hollow, my face older, like I'd aged 10 years in a single day. I pushed the door open. The bell above it jingled softly, and the smell of coffee and pancakes wrapped around me like a blanket. There were only two other customers, an older couple near the window and a man sitting alone at the counter. I chose a booth in the far corner and sat down. The waitress, maybe in her 50s, gave me a tired but kind smile. "What'll it be, hon?" "Just coffee," I murmured. She poured it without another word. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth sink into my fingers. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the steam rising from the cup. My reflection wavered in it, a stranger's face. That's when I heard the voice. "You look like a man who's been through hell." I looked up. An old man stood beside my booth. Gray hair, rough hands, eyes sharp but kind. He wore a worn-out coat and held his coffee like it was the only thing keeping him warm. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I hesitated, then gestured to the seat across from me. "Sure, go ahead." He slid into the booth, moving slowly like every bone in his body had a story. For a while, neither of us said a word. He sipped his coffee. I stared at mine. The silence wasn't awkward, just heavy, like it carried meaning we hadn't spoken yet. Finally, he nodded toward me. "Bad night." I laughed quietly, a dry, broken sound. "You could say that." He tilted his head. "Wife?" "Yeah," I said. "And kids?" "She left tonight." He nodded like he'd heard that story before. "Sorry to hear that." I shrugged. "Don't be. It's my fault anyway." He raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" I sighed. "I lost my job this morning. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Maybe she's right. I've been barely holding things together." He leaned back in his seat, studying me. "You remind me of someone I used to know." "Yeah?" I asked without much interest. He gave a sad smile. "My son." I glanced up. "Where is he?" The man looked down at his hands. "Gone. Left home 35 years ago. Never came back." I frowned. "Why?" He took a slow breath. "Because I gave him every reason to." The man's words hung in the air like smoke, soft but suffocating. "Because I gave him every reason to." I stared at him, not sure what to say. Something about the way he said it, quiet, regretful, final, made my chest tighten. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere far away, maybe 35 years back. He turned the coffee cup slowly between his hands, the ceramic scraping against the table. "I used to work down at the docks," he said. "Long hours, lousy pay. Thought I was doing it for my family. But every night, I'd come home tired, angry, and too proud to admit I was scared. So I took it out on them. My wife, my boy." His voice cracked slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a sip of coffee. "One night, we had an argument. Can't even remember what about. Probably something stupid. He was 17, full of fire. Told me he was done with me. Packed a bag and left." I swallowed. "Did he ever come back?" The man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hurt to see. "No." I found out years later he'd joined the army. Heard rumors he had a family somewhere down south. Never heard from him again. He leaned back and looked at me for the first time since sitting down. His eyes were sharp now, alive. "You've still got a chance, son. Don't make the same mistake I did." I looked away, tracing the rim of my cup. "It's too late. She's gone. They're gone." He chuckled softly. "You ever notice how people love to say that? It's too late? You're still breathing, aren't you?" I didn't answer. He set his cup down, leaned forward, and said 5 words I'll never forget. "Don't abandon them like me." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't sound like he was giving advice. It was more like a confession, a warning wrapped in regret. Those words hit something deep inside me, something I'd buried beneath all the excuses and failures. He continued quietly. You think losing a job makes you a failure? You think walking away will make it easier? Son, it doesn't. It just changes the shape of the pain. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He went on. You've already lost enough today. Don't lose yourself too. For a moment I didn't move. Couldn't. The diner around us faded away. The soft clatter of dishes. The low hum of conversation. All gone. It was just me and those words echoing in my head. Don't abandon them like me. The waitress came by, refilled our cups, and gave the old man a smile that said she'd known him for years. Another story, Harold? She teased. He chuckled. Maybe later. So that was his name, Harold. When she walked away, I finally found my voice. You come here often? He nodded. Most nights. Can't sleep much these days. Why here? I asked. He looked around the diner. The flickering neon light, the cracked leather seats, the hum of an old jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Because it's the last place my wife and I had dinner before she passed. Been coming here ever since. Reminds me that some things are still worth remembering. I didn't know what to say to that. We sat in silence for a while. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. Finally, I asked, You ever wish you could go back? He didn't even hesitate. Every damn day. His honesty cut deep. Harold leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Let me tell you something, Ethan. People think regret fades with time. It doesn't. It just learns how to sit quietly in the back of your mind, waiting for a moment like this. When you're weak, when you're alone, to whisper, You could have done better. I stared at the window beside us. It was still dark outside, but the faintest hint of dawn glimmered on the horizon. He followed my gaze. Sun's coming up, he said softly. You've got a choice to make when it does. I frowned. What choice? He smiled faintly. You can keep walking toward the darkness, or you can turn around. I wanted to believe him, but part of me was still drowning. You don't understand. I can't just show up and expect them to forgive me. He nodded. Maybe not, but you can show up anyway, because that's what love is. Showing up even when you don't know what you'll find. He took one last sip of his coffee, then slid out of the booth. His movements were slow, deliberate. Wait, I said. Where are you going? He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and placed them on the table. Got a long walk home. I stood up too. Will I see you again? He smiled, that same sad, knowing smile. Maybe, but I hope you won't need to. Then he walked out, the bell above the door jingling softly behind him. I sat there, staring at the empty seat across from me. The space where he'd been felt heavier than when he was there. Outside, the sky was turning a soft pink. Morning had arrived without asking permission. I looked down at my cold coffee, then back at the window. For the first time all night, I felt something flicker inside me. Not hope exactly, but something close. Maybe Harold was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. I stood up, left a few coins on the table, and stepped out into the cold morning air. The street was quiet. The world was waking up. I started walking. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I couldn't stay still. The wind bit at my face, but it felt good, real. Alive. I pulled my coat tighter and kept going, one step at a time. I walked past the park again. The swings were empty, the grass damp with dew. I could almost hear Nolan's laughter echoing in the distance. See Tessa chasing after her brother. The memories hurt, but for the first time I didn't push them away. I reached my house just as the sun broke over the rooftops. It was still there, small, quiet, waiting. Through the window I could see the empty living room. The couch where Tessa used to fall asleep during movie nights. The hallway where Nolan used to race his toy cars. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cold and still. Dust floated in the sunlight. I sat on the couch, staring at the family photos on the wall. One of them caught my eye, the four of us at the beach. Marielle's hair blowing in the wind. Nolan grinning with missing teeth. Tessa clutching her rabbit. I picked up the frame and ran my thumb across the glass. Harold's words echoed again. Don't abandon them like me. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours, Time didn't seem to exist. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the kitchen. The sink was full of dishes, the counters cluttered with unopened mail. I started cleaning, not because I had to, but because I needed to. Piece by piece, I put the house back together. By the time I was done, the sun was high in the sky. I grabbed my phone from the counter and stared at the screen. No new messages. My fingers hovered over Marielle's number. I hesitated. My throat tightened. Then I hit call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice. Tired, cautious, familiar. Ethan? I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, "Yeah, it's me." Silence. Then she said softly, "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "Not really, but I'm trying." There was another pause. Then, faintly, I heard Tessa's voice in the background. "Mom? Who is it?" And something inside me cracked open. I just wanted to say, I began, my voice shaking, "I'm sorry. For everything. For scaring you. For not being the man you needed me to be. I want to make it right. However long it takes." There was a long silence. Then she said quietly, "Let's talk. Later today. The kids would like that." When the call ended, I sat there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. And for the first time in a long time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had something left to fight for. When I hung up the phone, I just sat there for a while. The silence wasn't the same as before. It didn't feel heavy anymore. Felt open, like space waiting to be filled. Outside, the day had come alive. Kids on bikes passed by. Someone's lawnmower droned in the distance. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. Life hadn't stopped, even though mine almost had. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet. Most of my clothes were still there, wrinkled, forgotten, smelling faintly of work and dust. I picked out a clean shirt, the one Marielle always said made me look less tired. I smiled at the memory. I showered, shaved, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The man staring back wasn't the same one who'd walked out last night. He looked older, maybe, but there was something new in his eyes, or maybe something old I'd almost lost. Determination. I didn't know what I was going to say when I saw them. I just knew I had to go. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The air was warm now, the kind of late-morning sunlight that makes everything look softer. The bus to Marielle's sister's neighborhood came every hour. I sat near the back, hands folded tightly, watching the city pass by, the rusted fences, the small shops, the familiar streets I'd driven 100 times before but never really noticed. As the bus slowed near the stop, my stomach tightened. I almost didn't get off. Fear whispered in the back of my head. What if they don't want you back? What if it's too late? But then I remembered Harold's voice. Don't abandon them like me. And I stepped off. Marielle's sister, Claire, lived in a small house on the corner of Maple Street. White siding, blue shutters, a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. There were chalk drawings on the driveway, uneven lines, little stick figures, a sun with a crooked smile. Tessa's work, no doubt. I stood at the gate, frozen. Through the window, I saw movement. Marielle in the kitchen, her hair tied up, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, but peaceful. Then Nolan ran past behind her, chasing something with a plastic sword. I smiled without meaning to. Then the fear came back. What was I even doing here? Showing up unannounced like some ghost from a bad dream. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd already decided she was better off without me. But before I could turn away, the front door opened. Marielle stepped out, squinting into the sunlight. Her eyes found me instantly. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Ethan?" she said finally, her voice uncertain. "Hey!" I said softly. She came down the steps slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You came." I nodded. "Yeah. I wasn't sure if I should." She stopped a few feet away, studying me like she was trying to read a book she'd already memorized but didn't trust anymore. "You look different," she said. "Didn't get much sleep?" I joked weakly. She almost smiled. Almost. We stood there in awkward silence. The wind tugged at her hair. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I called because... She began, then stopped. I didn't know if you'd really come. I didn't either, I admitted. But I meant what I said last night. I want to try. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to start. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Just that. Okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a second chance carved in stone. But it was something. Then the front door burst open, and two small figures came running out. Dad! Nolan reached me first, throwing his arms around my waist. I dropped to my knees just as Tessa crashed into me too, her little hands clutching my coat. I felt their warmth, their breath, their heartbeat against mine. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not quietly, not holding it in, just raw, messy tears. Tessa pulled back slightly and looked up at me with those big brown eyes. Are you staying now? She asked. I swallowed hard. I hope so, sweetheart. I'm gonna try. Marielle stood on the porch, watching us. I could see her wiping her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. After a while, she said gently, Come inside. You look like you could use something to eat. I laughed through the tears. Always. The house smelled like pancakes and coffee. Claire was there too, sitting at the table with a curious smile. She greeted me softly, cautious but kind. Marielle handed me a plate. I sat across from her while the kids chattered about cartoons and school. For a while, it felt almost normal, like the chaos had taken a break just to let us breathe. Then, when the kids went outside to play, Marielle turned to me. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I just couldn't watch you drown anymore. I nodded. You were right to leave. I wasn't me anymore. We sat in silence, the weight of honesty hanging between us. I talked to someone last night, I said finally. An old man at the diner. He told me something I can't stop thinking about. She tilted her head. What did he say? Don't abandon them like me. She blinked, processing it. That's simple, but powerful. Yeah. I stared at the table. He lost his son a long time ago. Said he'd do anything to get him back. Made me realize I was halfway to becoming him. Marielle looked at me, her expression softening. You're not him, Ethan. I could have been, I said, if I kept running. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. Then don't run anymore. I looked at her hand, warm, familiar, and covered it with mine. For the first time, I didn't feel like a failure trying to win her back. I just felt grateful. The rest of the day passed quietly. The kids made me watch their favorite show, and we all laughed at jokes that weren't really funny but somehow still were. When evening came, I helped Marielle put them to bed. Nolan fought sleep the way kids do, but Tessa drifted off quickly, holding her rabbit against her chest. I stood there for a long time watching them breathe. When I stepped into the hallway, Marielle was waiting. They missed you, she said softly. I missed them too. We stood there, the house quiet except for the faint creak of the floorboards. I'm not asking you to forget everything, I said, or to pretend it didn't happen. I just want the chance to make things better. One day at a time. She nodded. That's all I ever wanted. There was no grand reconciliation. No dramatic music. Just two people standing in the soft glow of a hallway light, trying again. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool and still. Above me, the sky was full of stars. I thought about Harold. The way his hands trembled when he spoke, the sadness in his eyes, the quiet strength in his voice. I wondered where he was now, if he was sitting in that diner, telling another lost soul his story. Maybe he'd been doing it for years. Maybe I wasn't the first man he'd helped. Either way, I owed him more than I could ever repay. I closed my eyes and whispered the words again, not as a warning this time, but as a promise. Don't abandon them like me. The night air carried the words away, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel empty. I felt alive.